And we continue with the last invited presentation by Katrien Maes. She is Deputy Secretary General of the League of European Research Universities, shortly LERU or LERU, how do you call it? LERU? Yeah, okay. And she is with LERU since, LERU is a network of 23 renowned universities which advocates the values of research universities across Europe and beyond. She has been with LERU since 2004, having co-authored or reviewed many LERU policy papers, and she is also expert in the European research area and in innovation and higher education policies in several, and she serves on several advisory groups. Katrien Maes will talk about what are universities for. Is it time for a new deal? I'm really look forward to the questions to these two, to the answers to these two questions. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, dear Mr. Chairman, dear ladies and gentlemen. I am delighted to be here this afternoon, even if it was with a certain delay. I apologize, it was due to airplane delays. But I'm glad that I made it in time, more or less, for the start of this meeting. Thank you for inviting the League of European Research Universities, or LERU. We are delighted to participate in this meeting. I bring you the greetings of our Secretary General, Professor Kurt de Ketelaere, who couldn't be here himself today or tomorrow. So, I've put the question up there, what are universities for? Is it time for a new deal? Just a short introduction to how my talk will be structured. This first part will be about university, what it's for, and our quest for excellence. What does that mean? In a second part, I'll talk about impact. How do we define, interpret impact in the knowledge society that we live in today? Third of all, I'll talk a little bit about the interaction between science and policy. And finally, my last words will be on the university as a sanctuary, but a sanctuary that is open, connected, and socially engaged. So, some of these words will not be new to you. They've been already said by the previous speakers. Still, there are some particularities about universities that I hope will come through in my talk. The university, of course, is one of the oldest institutions in the world. After 800 or so years, it's still going strong. The Western, often the Humboldtian model of a university that has become almost universal and a successful model for higher education. The free and skeptical inquiry at the frontiers of human understanding underpins its wide range of activities in learning and teaching, in research and innovation, in entrepreneurship, in public engagement, and more. Despite its long-standing success, these are turbulent times for universities. There's criticism from many quarters. Professor Bert van der Zwaan, who's the former Rector Magnificus of Utrecht University and the former chair of LERU, in his recent book, Higher Education in 2040, lists some of these criticisms. We know them all well. The mass nature of education, the focus on efficiency and research output, the lack of collaboration with industry, the lack of society engagement, and so on. These criticisms have to be heard, assessed, given a value, and importantly, a response. Bert van der Zwaan also discusses some of the challenges: food, energy, climate, water, other resources, you name it. all of which are global issues. They've been captured, for instance, in the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, and so on. There are other challenges pertaining to the changing nature of work, the demands from the labor market, affecting learning and teaching and more at universities, from online learning to lifelong learning to student entrepreneurship. All of these are topics that we also as LERU are working on. Refer to a lot of the papers that we have written. In addition, the 21st century it is already that of the fourth industrial revolution, the digital revolution, characterized by parallel development of all kinds of technologies, from genetic engineering to virtual reality, machine learning, artificial intelligence, blockchain, digital currencies. Exciting new possibilities are rapidly developing with world-changing potential, benefits, and risks. I'll come back to the issue of how universities can interact with these challenges, but let me first remind ourselves that these advances to a large extent trace their origins to groundbreaking, pioneering, fundamental, blue skies research done at research universities. Such research is driven by a deep-seated curiosity to understand and to improve the human condition. Secondly, it's driven by talented people the university attracts, nurtures, and releases back into society. People who are, and I quote, if I may, one of our own papers, creative, critical, autonomous, intellectual risk takers. These are the words that we have used in some of our papers on doctoral education. And as we have said, it is talent more than technology that society needs or wants from universities. Thirdly, such research is fueled by competition, both by competition which can be ruthless, and by collaboration, which can also be challenging. Both are necessary to confront the challenges society faces and the opportunities they bring. It also means that the quest for excellence is and must be contested. It can never be taken for granted, but it must be earned and it must be continuously scrutinized. I have not defined actually the word excellence. When I looked for it in one of our seminal papers, What Are Universities For?, written in 2008 by Professors Jeffrey Bolton and Colin Lucas, people who were instrumental in shaping LERU's foundational principles, I only found one instance of it, and it wasn't talking about excellence at universities. It was in a phrase on society's technical excellence. Nor does the word excellence appear in LERU's mission statement. To be sure, excellence is not easily captured or defined, and neither can we claim to know excellence when we see it. Excellence is not an absolute. It derives its operational meaning from the context in which it is set, from the criteria that are and must be defined in that context. Excellence is also not the exclusive domain of pioneering research. It applies to innovation, to entrepreneurship, to teaching, learning, and so on. So not only is it our duty to set standards for excellence, importantly, it's our duty to make those standards fair, open, transparent, and merit-based. So meritocracy is, after all, what universities are about. Meritocracy refers to a social system in which merit or talent is the basis for sorting people into positions and distributing rewards. I'm using words by Merton, for instance, and Scully. It dictates that access to power and structures is granted to those that deserve it. Meritocracy requiring that competing ideas or hypotheses must be evaluated solely in terms of their merit is a deeply ingrained value in the academic world. In universities, it's the basis on which academics get tenure, they secure scarce research funding, they publish in prestigious journals, through rigorous competition that should naturally drive the most excellent to the top. However, the idea that excellence is recognized solely on the basis of pure merit does not always work well in practice. There is evidence showing that organizations with an explicit commitment to meritocracy are particularly susceptible to bias. Research by Castilla and Bernard, for instance. Universities are no exception to this. In a LERU paper on the effects of implicit bias and gender equality, we show how academic excellence is not always gender neutral. Although it is not an easy subject in the academic world, LERU believes it to be crucial, first of all, to recognize that the rules of meritocracy can inadvertently be circumvented by all of us. This is about men, about women being susceptible to bias as a cognitive process. And secondly, that we can commit to take action against it, in recruitment, for instance, evaluation and promotion procedures. We must, and we can, do this in this way to avoid this discrepancy between our idealized meritocratic beliefs and the de facto functioning of, for example, assessment procedures. The argument can and must also be extended to all underrepresented people and to all activity areas in universities, so also teaching, learning, innovation, and so on, if we are to build a more equal and inclusive and diverse university. That is another pressing imperative for universities, if they want to maintain their position of credibility, authority, relevance, and impact in society. Let me move on to part 2, impact. Over the last decade and more, the discussion of universities' impact on society has gained importance. It is, to a varying extent, embedded in politics referring to universities contributing to the knowledge society, solving global societal challenges, building an open and inclusive European research area, and more. LERU expects this trend to intensify even more in the near future. Impact has been in the past, to some extent still is, associated with economic benefit. As public institutions, universities, and most in Europe are public institutions, they're accountable to demonstrate that they use the public purse wisely. LERU is no exception to this. Twice in the past years, we've produced a report demonstrating the collective contributions of LERU universities to the economy. You can see on the slide, we can put numbers on it in terms of gross value added, in terms of people put out into the labor force, and so on. Whilst that is important, I'm happy to see that the prevalence of uniform and linear models of knowledge production and impact, focusing on easily quantifiable output and direct economic benefit, is a tide that has started to turn. Perhaps a bit slowly, perhaps a bit unevenly. But it's reassuring to us, to LERU, that governments and policymakers are beginning to realize that these models do not suffice to capture the very societal impact they want. And at worst, they may jeopardize fundamental scientific characteristics, such as unpredictability and experimentation and sufficient time span, and even failure, or as Ed Boyden has called it, constructive failure. In this open, non-linear and networked science system, academic knowledge is not a simple package that can be handed over. It's a dynamic part of a wider process which develops in interaction within a relevant context of stakeholders, each with their own expertise, their knowledge, and their insights. So we come to societal impact, to be regarded as the outcome of the creative encounter of stakeholders and their contributions, which actually should be right in the design of your, let's say, if it's a research project, in your design phase, and it should last throughout its course. Central to this is the concept of productive interactions. We've worked this out in this paper that you can see on the slide. The mechanisms through which research and other activities lead to socially robust knowledge and relevant applications. And also the second paper, which is there, which is a recent one, where we talk about impact in the next framework program, because as LERU, we're very much involved in the European Framework Programme for Research and Innovation, the funding that it distributes, how it is organized, and there are evolving discussions on how impact is measured and is going to be measured in the next framework programme. To determine research impact in the new model, transitional mechanisms will come under scrutiny, or even more scrutiny. Two such mechanisms, bibliometrics and peer review, each of them with their pros and cons, will need changes to remain fit for purpose and meaningful in a dynamic, open and networked research ecology. And many innovative approaches are starting to take ground. New qualitative and quantitative measurements are being developed, new methods aiming at social media, peer review is being extended with other expertise, just to name a few. These new evaluation mechanisms need to have a capacity to assess quality and relevance in a dynamic, nonlinear, and often serendipitous environment. The procedures need to be process-oriented, flexible, and able to review the different contributions of partners and productive interactions between them through time, as this changes. These new evaluative arrangements will differ per discipline, accounting for variation in production, communication, and context. So the LERU universities are also proactive in developing more meaningful and robust approaches to impact, recognizing that there are multiple pathways to impact, that not one size will fit all circumstances, and different sorts of research will generate different sorts of impact. Evidence of this can be found in universities' new strategic plans, in their support for research projects, in line with this model, societal stakeholders are involved from the start and throughout the process. I am referring, for instance, to influences also between, with government policies. Think of the research evaluation framework in the UK, the standard evaluation protocol in the Netherlands, and so on. So governments, policymakers, and funders consequently should support and incentivize universities in their endeavors to embrace this broad perspective on impact and the accompanying agenda. And they should engage with universities to discuss and to develop meaningful and sensible impact evaluation policies. And universities also should embrace this impact agenda, safe in the knowledge that it's fully compatible with their historical and fundamental missions of knowledge creation and transmission. And they should engage with others across the research ecosystem. That includes also properly evaluating academics' public engagement. We know that academics have long contributed freely their specialist knowledge to public bodies, to a broader public, and as public intellectuals. Often this was or still is done without the knowledge of the university or with its knowledge. It's part of what we have called in the LERU paper, What Are Universities For?, the halo effect of the university. But public engagement has come to the forefront as public policy seeks to be evidence-based and therefore depends on access to a wide range of specialists, and also as universities seek to fulfill their role in solving societal challenges. The academics' reputations for independence and their credibility make them ideal interlocutors for such debates, and universities offer a fertile space. The challenge for universities then is to create, with a light touch, an enabling environment that supports and encourages such activity. The challenge for government and other bodies is in part to express that need for what they want and to fashion the processes through which such inputs to public policy and engagement can be made. Let me move on a little bit more to science and policy, part 3. I will move on to from this slide. I forgot to show it to you. These are some of the elements that we have produced in our impact papers on the things that are involved in developing productive interactions between universities and other stakeholders. So, LERU and Science Policy Interface. 2 years ago, LERU signed up to the United Nations Academic Impact Principles, UNI for short. UNI is an initiative to align institutions of higher education, scholarship, and research with the UN. It aims to generate a global movement of minds to promote a new culture of intellectual social responsibility. And it's driven by a commitment, as it states on its website, to bedrock principles as freedom of inquiry, opinion and speech, educational opportunity for all, and global citizenship. So, in the spring, for instance, we organized a meeting of representatives from LERU universities engaged in university development cooperation and talking about the Sustainable Development Goals. And then we report to the UN about that meeting, and what you see on the slide there is a picture of the report of that meeting on their website. Secondly, LERU has recently obtained special consultative status with the UN Economic and Social Council, ECOSOC. As a result, LERU can now, in fact, actively engage with ECOSOC and its subsidiary bodies, as well as with the UN Secretary, the programs, the funds, the agencies, in a number of ways. So we can provide, for instance, expert analysis, raise public awareness, send representatives from LERU or from the universities to United Nations meetings and so on of the ECOSOC. This has happened thanks to the active engagement of one of our members, the University of Geneva, located in a city which is, of course, a global hub for multilateral diplomacy. And the University of Geneva has just now launched its Geneva Science Policy Interface, SPI for short, with the support of the Swiss Federal Department of Foreign Affairs and in collaboration with the University of Zurich, EPFL, and LERU. Part of the SPI's mission is to engage research-intensive universities in impactful partnerships and contribute to redefine university sector's global role and responsibility. It's to act as a decision-making support system, connecting international organizations with the latest knowledge, technology, and evidence provided by scientific institutions. And it can do this, for instance, or it will do this through active matchmaking, to fostering knowledge networks, to incubating collaborations and capacity building. So I think this is also a welcome initiative at the national level, because if I look at the outlook at the European level, as we do in LERU, looking at the next framework program, we see, for instance, that in the so-called Pillar 4, the structuring era pillar, there is not a lot of money for the types of activities that would support this policy making and science policy interface. It's perhaps also a question mark as to what will happen now that the SWOFS unit, the Science with and for Society unit in the European Commission in the DG Research and Innovation has been abolished. I understand the idea is to streamline it across other areas, but we have seen that when they did this to social sciences and humanities, abolishing the unit and streamlining it elsewhere, that this was ultimately not to the benefit of humanities and social sciences. So the jury is out. We are now linking this Geneva SPI engagement also to our interactions with global networks. As LERU, we have regular meetings with networks such as the AAU in the US, the GO8 in Australia, the AERU, East Asian universities, and a number of other ones. We'll have a common meeting in December where we'll engage delegates from the UN organizations, from LERU, and from the other global networks in Geneva to discuss a number of concrete ways in which we can engage. Picture of SPI in Geneva, and part 4, the university. Where are we going? Clearly, there are important developments and exciting opportunities for universities, demanding reflections about and substantial changes to the university's usual way of doing business. University should be, and I use Bert van der Zwaan's words again, a sanctuary for experimentation and reflection on all kinds of issues that will affect society and the labor market in years to come. A sanctuary that is open. Openness, sharing, and collaboration characterize many of the changes that are upon us. The transition to open science and open scholarship is leading to different open access publishing models and to open data, open infrastructure, changes in the metrics, assessment of promotion, and so on. Citizen science and interdisciplinarity also require more openness, the breaking down of silos, and a university that is more permeable. So a few words on interdisciplinarity. I'm almost there. We see interdisciplinarity as both something from an individual, bottom-up, academic mindset, and also an institutional agenda, driven by the quest for excellence and the desire to serve society. Universities are tasked with finding that balance, letting both approaches meet each other and lead to good things. Modern society depends on the whole range and the interconnectedness of that knowledge rather than on a subset or isolated disciplines. And this requires new ways of thinking, new structures, and new processes in universities. And it's important to stress the role of the humanities and the social sciences in this. It's been said before, but we as society are not going to solve all the societal challenges successfully if we consider them only or primarily as technological challenges, and if we don't comprehensively embed the human and the social dimensions of them. Education will, of course, be affected as well. The socially engaged university, as Bert van der Zwaan calls it, pays serious attention to preparing students for their future roles in society, as a considerable number of them will develop as leaders in society. So, of course, online learning and other effects of the digital society are already making profound marks on the university teaching. Again, on the slide, you can see some of the papers that we have produced that can speak to this. Okay, let's come back. But one thing is sure, students are our eternal youth. As they come through universities, about 1/4 of us is refreshed every year. They are the ones really who are, with their questioning and challenging minds, question us and challenge us to keep renewing ourselves. So with all these papers and these interactions, I would say this is how LERU works. That's the role LERU has, to analyze the issues, to find common ground, to discuss views with stakeholders inside and outside the university, with our papers and of course many events, public and private events in Brussels and elsewhere. One final part, the New Deal, right. Universities have to engage in many ways if they want to maintain their position of credibility, trustworthiness, authority, and relevance in the information-rich society. This is also what Bert van der Zwaan in his book says. Universities will need to carry out a whole range of activities in society, clearly demonstrating what it stands for. And he also says there's much work to be done, and there is much work to be done. While the quest for excellence in advancing knowledge is existential for universities, there are many other roles that universities need to fulfill, perhaps too many of them, which is why individuals in universities have to reflect deeply about the roles and the agendas that they take as priorities for them, as they may not be able to do all of those well at once. So diversification of types of universities and their strategic priorities may certainly be in the cards for us. More than ever, we need to work on a broad debate in which society and university, I need to go to my final slide, look each other squarely in the eye to discuss the question of what would be desirable in the future, not only for the university, but also for society. And we are seeing far too little of this, partly because there is such mutual distrust between the university and the world of policy and politics. These are Bert van der Zwaan's words. I agree very much with the partly, because it is only partly distrust. I think partly it's also lack of knowing each other really, and lack of really trying. Nowadays, this also needs to be linked to citizens' perceived and real lack of trust in knowledge, It was already mentioned before, disinformation, fake news, and so on. And by extension, this is a lack of trust in universities. This is and is a real area of concern for us. We definitely need new or improved paths for dialogue and new kinds of agreements. Perhaps we need to revise the sometimes tacit or implicit compact of the past between governments and universities. Perhaps we need a new deal for universities. In the LERU paper, What Are Universities For?, Bolton and Lucas argue that the challenge for government is to articulate a compact with universities that recognizes the value of autonomy and freedom and supports them. It also is to assess their value and benefit without oppressive mechanisms of control or direction that undermine their effectiveness, and to create processes of funding that do not drive them into narrow or short-term obsessions. The challenge for university leaders is to recognize that academic freedom has rights and entails duties, and that it is a crucial source of creativity. But that universities also have to be able to speak truth to power and truth to authority. It is central to the university's vitality and in its utility to society. Those values are as old as universities themselves, but they should remain fundamental, and they are inalienable to universities, whatever the shape and role of the university in the future will be, and whatever the format of the compact between universities and governments will be. So, final sentence, the university will make it to 2040. That is Bert van der Zwaan's reassuring conclusion. But we should expect great changes. Reflection, debate, and hard work will be required to give shape to all these changes. So, therefore, it's very timely and welcome that the Estonian Academy of Science is organizing this debate and tomorrow. Thank you for the opportunity to be here and to participate in this discussion.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Unfortunately, we run out of time, and I think, postpone the discussion to the coffee break, which starts right now just in the room behind me. We will start again at 4:15 exactly, and I will ring the bell in order to give you the time when we start again, okay? Thank you very much.